Imagine the silence. 30 men, the greatest killers in Greece, huddled in the dark. They can hear the Trojans laughing outside, celebrating their victory. They can smell the sweat of their own fear and the scent of the pine wood that encases them. One sound, one sneeze, or one clatter of a sword, and they are dead men. But they wait, because they know that in a few hours, the most beautiful city in the world will be a graveyard. How did it come to this? How did a civilization of gold and high walls end up as a pile of ash? It started with a wedding, a golden apple, and the petty jealousy of the gods. Troy, a name that has echoed through 3 millennia. To understand its fall, we have to look back to a single moment of divine spite. At a wedding on Mount Olympus, one guest was intentionally left off the list: Eris, the spirit of discord. Offended, Eris didn't bring a curse. She brought a game. She tossed a golden apple onto the table, inscribed with 3 words: to the fairest. Instantly the peace of the gods vanished. Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite all claimed the prize. To settle the dispute, Zeus looked down at the mortal world and found a neutral judge, a young man named Paris. At the time, Paris was a humble shepherd, but he carried a dangerous secret. He was a prince of Troy, cast out at birth because of a prophecy that he would one day burn his city to the ground. He didn't know he held the fate of a civilization in his hands until the sky split open and 3 goddesses stood before him. Each goddess offered a bribe that no mortal could refuse. Hera offered him the crown of Asia and Europe, absolute power. Athena offered him the wisdom to never lose a battle, absolute glory. But Aphrodite offered him something far more dangerous, the love of the most beautiful woman on earth. Paris, driven by his heart rather than his head, handed the apple to Aphrodite. In that moment, he gained a lover, but he earned the eternal hatred of the 2 most powerful goddesses in the Greek pantheon. The judgment of Paris was the first brick laid in Troy's tomb. Aphrodite kept her word, but the path was paved with blood. Paris was eventually welcomed back to Troy by his family, ignoring the screams of his sister Cassandra. She was a prophetess cursed by Apollo to see the future, but never be believed. She saw the towers of Troy burning in Paris's shadow, but to the court, she was just a girl lost in madness. On a diplomatic mission to Sparta, Paris met Queen Helen. She was the daughter of Zeus, a woman so beautiful that every prince in Greece had once fought for her hand. To prevent a civil war over her, these kings had sworn a sacred oath. They would defend her husband, whoever he might be, against anyone who tried to take her. When Paris and Helen fled back to Troy, whether by choice or by force, the trap was sprung. King Menelaus of Sparta found his queen gone and his treasury plundered. His fury was absolute, but his brother Agamemnon saw something else: opportunity. Agamemnon didn't just want Helen back, he wanted Troy, the gateway to the riches of the East. He called in the oaths. The messengers went out, and the heroes of the age began to gather. Not everyone wanted to die for a stolen wife. Odysseus, the clever king of Ithaca, tried to feign madness, ploughing his fields with salt to stay with his newborn son. He was outsmarted and forced into the fleet. Then there was Achilles, Greece's greatest warrior. His mother, the sea nymph Thetis, knew the prophecy. If he went to Troy, he would win immortal fame but die young. She hid him in a palace, disguised as a woman. But the Greeks knew they could not win without the greatest warrior the world had ever seen. Odysseus found him, and when the war trumpet sounded, Achilles' true nature exploded. He chose a short, glorious life over a long, forgotten one. The largest army in human history assembled at the port of Aulis. 1,000 ships clogged the harbor. But the gods weren't finished being petty. Agamemnon had offended the goddess Artemis, and she stilled the winds. The price for a breeze to Troy? The sacrifice of Agamemnon's own daughter, Iphigenia. The king chose the war over his child. The sacrifice was made, the winds rose, and the Greek fleet cut through the waves like a scythe. The first Greek to touch Trojan soil, Protesilaus, died instantly, fulfilling yet another prophecy. But the Trojans were ready. Led by Prince Hector, a man of duty and the greatest warrior Troy had, they pushed the Greeks back to the beach. For 9 years, the war was a bloody stalemate. The Greeks couldn't break the walls, and the Trojans couldn't drive them into the sea. The Greeks became pirates, raiding surrounding cities for food, gold, and captives. It was during one of these raids that a spark was lit that would nearly destroy the Greek army from within. In the 10th year, Agamemnon insulted the priest of Apollo by taking his daughter. Apollo responded by raining arrows of plague upon the Greeks. To stop the dying, Achilles forced Agamemnon to return the girl. Agamemnon agreed, but only if he could take Achilles' own prize, the woman Briseis. The insult was catastrophic. Achilles withdrew his elite troops, the Myrmidons, and sat by his ships watching his own side die. He even prayed for the Trojans to win, just to prove how much the Greeks needed him. Without Achilles, Hector and the Trojans went on a rampage. They breached the Greek wall and reached the ships. The hope of Greece began to burn. Patroclus, Achilles' closest companion, couldn't stand the slaughter. He begged to wear Achilles' armor, believing the mere sight of it would terrify the Trojans. Achilles agreed, but gave a chilling warning. Drive them back, but do not approach the walls. The plan worked. The Trojans fled from the ghost of Achilles. But Patroclus, drunk on glory, forgot the warning. He reached the walls of Troy, where the god Apollo struck the armor from his back. Hector found him, defenseless in the dust, and delivered the killing blow. When the news reached Achilles, the world stopped. His grief was so loud it was heard in the depths of the ocean. He didn't just want to win the war anymore. He wanted to become the personification of death. Wearing new, divine armor, forged by the god Hephaestus, Achilles returned. He slaughtered so many Trojans that the river Scamander became choked with bodies. Finally, he stood before the gates, facing Hector. In a moment of raw human terror, Hector ran. The greatest protector of Troy was chased 3 times around the walls by the monster Achilles. Above them, Zeus weighed their fates on golden scales. Hector's side sank. The gods left him. The duel was short. Achilles drove his spear into the gap in Hector's throat and ended it then and there. As Hector lay dying, he begged for his body to be returned for burial. Achilles' response echoed through history. There are no pacts between lions and men. Achilles tied Hector's body to his chariot and dragged it through the dirt, circling the city as Hector's parents watched from the walls. For 12 days, Achilles desecrated the body, but the gods moved the heart of elderly King Priam. Guided by Hermes, the old king snuck into the enemy camp and knelt before the man who killed his son. He kissed the hands that had slaughtered his children. For a moment, the war vanished. 2 men wept together over the shared tragedy of being human. Achilles, moved by Priam's courage, returned the body and granted a 12-day truce. The war eventually resumed, and the stakes grew higher. New allies arrived to help Troy. The Amazons led by Queen Penthesilea, and the Ethiopians led by Memnon, the son of the dawn. Achilles killed them both, but his own clock was ticking. At the Scaean gates, Paris, the man who started it all, fired a single arrow. Guided by Apollo, it found the only place Achilles was mortal, his heel. The greatest warrior of the age fell in the dirt, eventually succumbing to his wounds. Soon after, Ajax the Great committed Sudoku after losing a dispute over Achilles' armor to the clever Odysseus. The Greeks' big 3 were down to 1. With their best men dead, Odysseus realized that Troy would never fall to a sword. Instead, it would fall to a lie. The Greeks dismantled their own ships to build a massive wooden horse. They left it on the beach and sailed away, or so it seemed. They were actually hiding behind the nearby island of Tenedos. The Trojans, exhausted by 10 years of siege, found the horse. Despite the warnings of the priest Laocoon, who famously said, "I fear the Greeks, even when they bring gifts," the Trojans believed the lie of a Greek plant named Sinon. They tore down their own walls to bring the offering inside. That was the night Troy died. The Greek ghosts climbed out of the horse's belly and opened the gates. The fleet returned. What followed was a night of unutterable horror. King Priam was butchered at his own altar. Hector's infant son was thrown from the walls to ensure the bloodline ended. Menelaus found Helen, but when he raised his sword to kill her, her beauty, just as Aphrodite promised, stopped his heart. He took her back. Only one Trojan hero escaped, Aeneas, who carried his father on his back and led the survivors toward a new destiny that would one day become Rome. By dawn, the most beautiful city in the world was a smoldering graveyard. The Greeks won, but the victors found no peace. Agamemnon would be murdered by his wife upon his return. Odysseus, on the other hand, would spend 10 more years lost at sea before making it home. For centuries, Troy was considered a fairy tale, but in the 19th century, Heinrich Schliemann dug into a hill in Turkey and found the charred remains of a great city. The legend was real, but the true power of the story isn't in the archaeology, it's in the characters. It's a warning about how petty ego, stolen love, and the pride of kings can burn the world to the ground. Thank you for watching till the end. Leave a comment, like the video, and subscribe to the channel, as it helps with the almighty algorithm. Cheers!